Hi everyone, it's Donna Stevenson here from NeuroBox, and welcome to another episode of our Let's Talk, always with a brilliant guest, and today is no exception. And I'll get on to our guest in a moment because we're going to have a great chat about ED&I, and that's an issue that a lot of us are thinking about these days, isn't it, for a variety of reasons. But as I said, this is a NeuroBox Let's Chat session. I am head of training here at NeuroBox, and I've got shoulder length brown hair. I'm wearing a brilliant grey NeuroBox t-shirt and a good old denim jacket as well. It's great to have your company with, as I say, what's going to be a fantastic chat with a great guest. I'm joined by Lyndsey Oliver, and she is the head of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion at BaxterStorey. Hi, Lyndsey.
Hi, Donna. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us.
No
And I've got
problem.
lots of questions to get through. I'm very aware that your work at BaxterStorey is brilliant, and I know you're going to share some of that
Oh,
today.
thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. It's very true. And we love here at NeuroBox to shine a spotlight when we do see this great practice. So, as I said, we're going to chat about ED&I, and you're the head of that over in wonderful BaxterStorey. So, first of all, let's set the scene. Tell us about what you guys do, and actually a little bit about your role and your journey within the ED&I community, Lyndsey.
So, BaxterStorey are a hospitality provider, and we work across the UK, Ireland, France, Belgium, Netherlands, and are continuing to grow. I joined as head of ED&I back in January 2023. Before then, they didn't have anyone solely focused on ED&I. And just a little bit of background prior to that, I ran my own business for 10 years working in this area called Making Mischief. And before that, actually, I worked for 14 years in IT for Diageo. So I'm an example of someone who's had a very squiggly career, but I bring all of that experience to the role in BaxterStorey.
Brilliant. I love that idea of a squiggly career, because I think in the part of the business that you work within, all those life experiences, I think, really help, don't they? Because you
Yeah,
work
totally.
with many different walks of life. We've also had their own squiggly careers.
Yeah, and I think one of the, sorry, Donna, I was just going to
No,
say,
go for it. Yeah, please do.
I think what's helped, although I don't know whether people within the business will disagree, but hopefully they will agree. But the fact that I haven't actually worked in the hospitality industry prior to this role means that I bring a slightly different view of some of the things that the industry does as a whole, and also can bring examples from other industries into BaxterStorey. And I think that just helps in terms of defining our overall approach at BaxterStorey as to how we're tackling ED&I within the business.
Yeah, I think it's wise words, because we talk so much now about the lived experience and all our different voices coming together, which gives us that great, celebration of many different identities. So yes, I think you're right. Bringing all those different lived experience and being almost an outsider coming in, Lyndsey, I could imagine was a great strength. Why does BaxterStorey have this big commitment? I said at the beginning, we're very aware your practice is brilliant, and we're going to get into that as we chat further. Did you bring, as you came into the business, the commitment, the passion? Was it already there and then they kind of found you, Lyndsey? Talk us through where this passion comes from at BaxterStorey.
So BaxterStorey obviously brought in the role because they were committed to actually focusing on it and making a difference. And I think what added to that, so I joined in January 23, as I said. In February 23, we actually went through a rebrand. So if you actually look at BaxterStorey's logo, it is BaxterStorey, but also underneath that, you've got fueling your individuality. So fueling your individuality for BaxterStorey is not just a tagline that sits underneath our logo. It's absolutely a way of being. And so the way that I've approached this and the business have approached this is actually, this is about a cultural change. We don't just talk about fueling your individuality. It's about how do we embed it across every different function within the business. How do we take an inclusion first approach? Because you can't fuel anyone's individuality unless you really are looking at inclusion, because otherwise it doesn't actually work. And so that inclusion first approach, I think, is super important. And actually, it's something that I hugely believe in. If you get inclusion right, diversity and representation will naturally flourish. For me, there is a point, but I don't think it's as successful if you bring diversity in and bring representation in. Actually, if you haven't got an inclusive environment for those people to land in, then often you get a higher attrition rate and a higher turnover rate. So if you get the culture right and you really focus on psychological safety and inclusion first and building that sense of belonging across every single team member within the business, I think then you've got a greater chance of making sure that, you know, you are representative at every level. And the other aspect, I think, in terms of why we're so passionate about it is that as much as we concentrate on what we have to do legally, of course, through the Equalities Act, there is a big piece which actually is around the fact that diversity spans across all sorts of different things outside of that which is defined within the legislation. And so the way that we approach it is about the Equalities Act, but also it's about more than the Equalities Act, because we know that discrimination, marginalisation and oppression happens within those characteristics, but also beyond those characteristics as well. And I think if you then take that more wide-eyed approach and to this, then people see themselves represented in a variety of different ways. And it's not necessarily just around those things, as I say, defined in the Equalities Act.
Yeah, I love everything you said there. I think what you say about culture is spot on. And the idea that, as you shared, it makes great people sense, but also business sense. And I think that's sometimes what organisations can forget, that it does actually impact on the health of your business and the finances and so on. As important as getting it right for our colleagues, it does impact on the bottom line as well. And it sounds like you guys at BaxterStorey are really plugged into that. I love that holistic idea that you've got, Lyndsey. And some of us that follow you on LinkedIn will be very aware of some of the exciting things that you've got coming down the track, or things that you've just celebrated. So with that in mind, tell us about some of the latest adventures that you guys have been on around the ED&I journey.
So, I mean, we've done loads of stuff over the last couple of years, but just to highlight a few things. So we rolled out last year a new workplace adjustments policy process, and there's lots of things that actually come off of that as well. And part of the reason that we've called it workplace adjustments is we want to normalise adjustments in the workplace and normalise the conversation about it. And the reality is that reasonable adjustments, those that are defined by law to help people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, absolutely and obviously are essential. But often people don't necessarily want to ask for things or talk about things. And so the more that we can normalise workplace adjustments, the more it makes it okay for everybody, especially those, as I say, who need those reasonable adjustments. And the reality is that most of us at some stage in our career will require adjustments, whether temporarily or permanently. And so I think that's part of the cultural change piece, is that if we normalise it, it makes it more psychologically safe for people to ask and for people to disclose. So kind of hanging off of that, we had other projects going on. So we also launched an inclusive dress code project. So we now have inclusive dress code guidelines. They are around provision of adjustments, but also things such as piloting maternity chef whites, because randomly there is no such thing as a maternity chef white within the industry. I know one of our competitors has created one, but it's not available across the industry. There was actually one that was that went online actually at the end of last year, but it's twice as expensive as a standard chef white. And what we're trying to do is to link in with some of our ESG targets around it, around reuse, because if you take a maternity chef white, it's probably only needed for, 20 weeks. And the standard lifetime of a chef white is 2 years. So actually, if we can have a reuse pool of those chef whites, it just helps with our environmental credentials as well. And also partnering with that uniform provider around zero waste to landfill as well. So when those do come to end of life, what actually happens with those uniforms? And again, it's more around how do you link in with not just kind of a one-off project, but how do you take a more strategic approach as to how does it link in with like various ESG commitments that we have. So that's a couple of things. We also kicked off last year inclusive kitchen culture project to really look at actually how do we make sure that we have the most inclusive kitchen culture possible. And what I should say actually is, so we've set ourselves the ambition to set the standard and be recognised for having the most inclusive culture in hospitality. So that kind of is our ambition. we don't have a date for when we will get there, but that is kind of what's driving us. We've had a massive growth in our ERGs over the last 2 years. When I first joined, we had 3. We've now got 6, and they are really passionate and dedicated and are doing all sorts of really amazing things. They all have an exec sponsor aligned with each of the ERGs. They all have a budget. They all get to decide how they spend that budget and what they focus on. And they all get comms support from our amazing brand and comms team to help really make sure that those campaigns are executed really brilliantly. And what I would say is that is a bit of a tough gig as well, because by nature of what our team members do, most of them are in clients kind of serving breakfast, serving coffees. And so actually getting into those team members and visibility of those team members means that, you know, we really need to make sure that we have a variety of approaches and not just face-to-face activities, but also lots of virtual things as well. And then I think the other thing that hopefully, fingers crossed, is going to go live in March is we've been working on a new suite of e-learning focused on protected characteristics. But as per my point earlier, they're not actually going to be named after the protected characteristics, because we're going to try and make them kind of more expansive and more inclusive. So, for example, pregnancy and maternity is covered in the Equalities Act, but our e-learning module around that is going to be called Paths to Parenthood, and recognition that actually there's various paths to parenthood, and if we can be inclusive of all paths, of which pregnancy and maternity is one aspect of it, it again makes for that more inclusive approach. So yeah, there's loads going on, Donna, in my massive team of 1, but I think yeah, it just shows the appetite that BaxterStorey has for it in terms of how they embrace it, how they're committed to it, and what we're really trying to do. And part of that is also to kind of like shake up how we do things in the hospitality industry a little bit. And yeah, so it's good. It's all good.
It's amazing. I mean, you say a team of 1, but beyond you, Lyndsey, you are a massive organisation, aren't you?
Yeah, we're over 9,000, Donna.
Yeah,
wow. And I cheekily say that everybody's in my team, because so many people do help to drive towards delivering all of that.
We've all got a role to play.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, perfect. What has been any standout moments for that? But also, as you're talking in the different ways you're kind of trying to get your colleagues to engage with incredibly busy and demanding day jobs. We know how busy and demanding the hospitality business is, fast paced and so on. Have you had a lot of buy-in really from your 9,000 plus colleagues when you took them on this journey? And if there are any standout moments for you on that journey, Lyndsey, beyond, I mean, some of the things you've just shared there wouldn't even cross my mind about getting it right for everybody within your organisation. But as you've shared, it makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't we have maternity chef whites and so on? So,
I don't know.
Yeah,
it boggles me sometimes what I discover. But
once you hear it, you think, oh yeah, why didn't we have these things previous? Yeah. But that's part of the nature
and
of
not
job,
just within our company, right? Just in the industry. Which
definitely.
Again,
yeah. Well, anyway, more power to you, what you're doing in that space. It's awesome. This is why we wanted to chat with you. But coming back to what I asked, any standout moments? I mean, there's so many there. But also, what's been the buy-in from all those thousands of colleagues that you've got? And has the secret been to work in different ways to get people to draw into the narrative around ED&I?
Yeah, so if I go for standout moments, I think for me, I mean, we've been shortlisted for some awards, which is all very good, and we're very excited about that. But I think the standout moments for me are just when individuals approach me and actually say, oh my goodness, this is amazing, thank you ever so much, and share something about themselves, which is incredible. We've done loads of work around, we've created a whole, I can't remember how many people, but I think we're at over 20 menopause champions across the business, because again, we're trying to normalize conversations about menopause. And what's super important about that is it's not only for people experiencing menopause, but supporting people who are experiencing menopause. And our menopause champions span across all gender identities, from really senior people within our business down to more junior people. And again, it's one of those things which I'm super proud of, because the more that we can talk about this stuff, the easier it is for people. So for me, it's the little things that stand out for me, as much as there are kind of like big things that we can kind of hang our coats on. It is that individual difference where you know that you've really impacted someone. I I guess one of the other things actually, so last year we rolled out some Tommy's e-learning from Tommy's the charity. And as part of that, there's 3 modules around that. One for supporting people who are going through pregnancy and parenting, one around supporting people going through the fertility journey, and also one for experiencing people who've going through, unfortunately, baby loss or miscarriage. And again, not necessarily a nice topic, but it is about making sure that people have the right tools to support kind of those people within the business. And for Tommy's, what I find really encouraging about BaxterStorey, when we implemented that, obviously there's a cost associated with that, but the ROI around that is, can we help one person? Can we help one person who's experiencing that, which is incredible. In other businesses, it would require a lot more of a business case, but we did that before we actually officially launched. So before we actually officially launched, that was used and it made a difference to one of our team members. And for me, I just think that is what really makes a difference. And I think sometimes we can really complicate ROIs and things like that. But at the end of the day, they're individuals within the business who need support, and how do we provide the best support for that? So yeah, so a few standout moments for different reasons. And remind me of the second part of your question. Sorry, I forgot the second part.
Buy-in, but it almost sounds like, why wouldn't your colleagues be involved in this? Because it sounds like you're meeting everyone where they're at, which is very special, I think. Have you found it easy to get your colleagues to participate? As I say, you're a huge business, really, with lots of moving parts.
So the reality is, just to kind of full disclosure, we are on a journey. 2025 for me is around embedding. We have embedded more in some parts of the business. So we've got over 850 locations, from single team member sites through to hundreds of team members in one location, which effectively is like having 850 small businesses. And so for us, 2025 is really around embedding and making sure that we cascade our messages and kind of so that everybody knows what's available in terms of support and to get involved. We ran our first ED&I sense of belonging survey last year in October, and we tend to remeasure again annually. And yeah, for our first survey, we did really well. We got 7.7 out of 10 in terms of a sense of belonging, which is amazing. And I think we just need to make sure that we continue to build on that. We continue to make sure that we increase participation rate in that survey so that we know that we are actually getting to people. But yeah, sometimes people only get to hear it when they're ready to hear, because that is the reality of this work. And I think the more that you can make it open and accessible to everybody, so everybody can see themselves within the approach, that really helps getting the buy-in, as opposed to just focusing on like specifics. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, wise words. And you've used one of my favourite words, belonging. That's, I think, at the very heart of everything that we speak about in this space. It's that feeling about belonging. Now, Lyndsey, we have a lot of different folks who listen to our conversations on these LinkedIn Lives, some individuals and some organisations. And you very eloquently talked us through, and very honestly, and thank you for that, your journey on, the differences that's happening at BaxterStorey. For those who are listening and not sure where to start on their journey, any wise words of wisdom for them? Where can we start? Or any things that you've learned through, your own journey about trying to get it right for folks?
So, wise words.
I'll put you on the spot here, Lyndsey.
Yeah. So I would say just start anywhere. Start small. You don't have to go big bang and have everything approached. Actually, baby steps forward are baby steps forward. And there's that exponential curve, isn't there? Which is actually even like incremental steps that actually take you to a better place eventually, as opposed to a big bang here, which kind of has a slightly different trajectory. And I would say that also just being aware that you're not going to get it right first time. You will have to adapt your messaging. You will have to seek different perspectives. And I would just say, don't aim for practice makes perfect. Aim for practice makes progress, because any kind of progress in this area is progress, and we need to continue to make progress, to make sure that organisations are inclusive for anybody. Yeah, and as I say, I think there's an element of make it authentic to the organisation. We really centre our messaging around fuel your individuality. It is about BaxterStorey as a business. For me, that there's a liberation in that, in terms of actually getting something right for your business and not necessarily comparing yourself to others. Comparison is good in one way, but also it can often mean that you don't necessarily do what's right for your business at the right time for your business. So yeah, they would be my key points. And the other aspect is talk to the people on the floor of your business. They are the best people to really signal to you what needs to be done and what you need to focus on to really make a difference. And that's why our ERGs are super important. And we listen to them. We meet on a quarterly basis. The heads of each, or the chairs of each ERG, are on my ED&I quarterly review with the CEO. So they literally get to share what they're doing with the CEO and why, and to bring some of those issues forward that their communities are facing and help us to make a change. And one of those was we changed our offer around maternity leave because it was rubbish, I have to say, absolutely rubbish, because the industry was rubbish in terms of what was offered. And we changed that to 24 weeks in 2023. And that was equalised across maternity, adoption and surrogacy. So wherever we make a change, it's around how do we make a change so that it's kind of across the whole group and not just kind of like for one group in particular. And that was driven through RISE, our Women in Hospitality Network, basically challenging the business to say, you've got to do better, you've got to step forward and you have to make this change. And, you know, they came with a brilliant case and we listened to them and we implemented that. And as soon as we implemented that, other people within the industry followed as well. So brilliant.
So you're real vanguards there in what you're doing. And again, thank you for making these differences. I love that what you say, practice makes progress. I might have to steal that, Lyndsey, because
I stole it from skiing.
Makes me
I
feel
went skiing and the ski instructor was like, you don't go for perfect, go for progress. I was like, oh yes, I like that. So
practice
yeah.
Make progress.
Yeah,
love it.
Practice
Yeah,
makes progress.
love it.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. And I like that as well. On a more serious note, the listening. And I love the structure you've got. So you've got the ERGs are packing a punch, aren't they? You're getting that grassroots conversations, then it filters up to the top, and the organisation is listening. It sounds like you've got a real robust kind of structure there to pack a punch with the voices coming through and make a difference.
We do. Yeah. And there's a piece which is, and we're always open to improvement as well. There's always ways that we can improve. So I think it's just not kind of thinking that you've got it right. It's staying open, continuing to listen, continuing to take action on what you hear as well, because there's no point if you hear something just not actually responding to it. And even if you can't for any reason, I mean, there's lots of benefits that we'd like to consider, but we need better data, for example. And we're moving to a new HRIS platform at the end of this year, which should give us, or will give us, better data. So there's some stuff that, you know, you're kind of reliant on some big changes and big investments before you can truly make progress around it. But I think it's just about being honest about that, to say, absolutely, would love to do that. And the way to enable that is through this move, which is coming at this point in time. And just to be honest about where you're at.
But I think that honesty is so refreshing, because I think it's truly authentic by saying, we do this, you know, we've made these changes, but we're still listening, we're still learning, practice makes progress, we're going to implement this. And I can just imagine how exciting that is within the organisation, actually, and that investment of, like you say, some new systems. Because I was going to ask you what's coming down the track then. This conversation is pretty much at the beginning of 2025. You've glossed over the awards that you guys are nominated very modestly, and I might get you to share a bit more about those. But you've also shared about the tech, some of the new systems that you've got coming through. So what does this year hold for you guys then?
Oh, there's lots. So as I said, the e-learning that's coming is kind of like one of my big focus areas. We're also submitting for 2 accreditations, which is off the back of all the work that we've done. That is a lot of work just to even press the go button, and also quite scary because you just don't know. You don't know. It's like a school teacher marking your homework, isn't it? You actually don't know until you put it out there for marking. So that's coming down the line. And then just in terms of our focus areas for this year, each ERG is doing 3 campaigns. So they do a heavyweight campaign, a medium weight campaign, and a lightweight campaign, which means 18 campaigns across the year. So that's really exciting. We're also focusing towards the back end of the year around what more can we do around our neurodivergent team members, because we know that we need to do more. Just kind of the basic training through the protected characteristics we know isn't enough. We've got a couple of pilots that are running. One is for maternity chef whites. As I say, that pilot will continue to the middle of the year, and hopefully we'll move it to business as usual in the second half of the year. We're also running an extended pilot for some software called Read Write, which Donna, you might know about. Which again, we're just testing out some use cases. It's available as a workplace adjustment through the IT service desk anyway, but we're looking at some use cases around that, because the way that our business works is we tend to if we win new business, which we're doing at the moment, which is brilliant, you basically mobilize a huge site at once. And so we're looking at the use case around Read Write, so that people don't have to disclose if they need adjustments around it, that it's already there. And then other things around technology. Technology is a big one, but it's just, it's one of those things that's a slow process because it requires big investment. And there's a big bit around how do you make your systems more accessible. And again, for me, there's a big bit here around how do you design inclusion in rather than designing inclusion by request. So one of our ESG pillars is inclusion by design, and that's the whole point about accessible software. If software is accessible, people don't have to always disclose that they need things. And there's progress that we need to make around that. But again, systems are a big investment point, but there's always that challenge when we introduce something new. How do we ensure that we challenge those providers to be as accessible as they possibly can? And some of them aren't. Some of them haven't necessarily considered more than just the basics, and we don't want to just do the basics. We want to go beyond the basics. So lots. And then the other big one is our inclusive kitchen culture project. As I said, we got to the end of analysis at the end of last year. We're moving into 135 action plans around that. That's embedded into our food and beverage team's ambitions for this year and beyond. So it's really nice to see, for me, how that gets embedded into different parts of the business. Obviously, our food and beverage offer is huge, and it's the majority of our business in terms of what we do. And actually making it work for that aspect of the business is super important, because if you embed it in there, then there's all sorts of things that we can do in that. And kitchens are really interesting. They're really interesting places. And if you look at every single different aspect of the environment and what we do, and it links in with our offer, basically, because the more we look at fueling people's individuality, we know it creates more creativity, more innovation. And we are all about creativity and innovation. We don't just offer bulk standard pies and mash. Pies and mash we can offer, of course, but a lot of our food offer is about innovation. It's about connecting to health and well-being. And so for me, it's a nice fit within our business.
Wow, Lyndsey, amazing. What you've described there is an organisation truly firing on all cylinders in the best possible way. All this brilliant stuff coming through that, as you say, it tethers really closely to your outward facing work, because it makes what you do as a business even better. So on the back of all this positivity and these great plans for 2025, sadly, we are operating now in a much more negative community and environment across our broader society and internationally around DE&I. We suddenly seem to have gone into a situation where now DE&I is being blamed for lots of the ills and tragedies and negativity within our society. And obviously it's something we're very aware of, and it's really, really a concerning situation. And I'd asked you before we were going to chat today whether I could ask you what your thoughts are on this very scary time, maybe, that we're heading into now, very negative time around DEI and the opinions around this movement. So please share your thoughts on this rather negative culture that we're drifting into, if that's the way I can put it.
So I think that for me, there's two aspects to this. One is the individual side of it, and the other is the organisation. So if I take the individual side of it, in terms of people within the business, people outside of the business, we know that there's going to be a lot more misinformation and disinformation out there. And I reiterate time and time again, this is what we're doing within the business. I can't stop what's happening outside of the business as much as I would love to, but we have to be aware that people within all of our businesses are getting that misinformation, that disinformation. We have to know, or we know that people will be affected by that, especially if they're within the LGBTQIA+ community, for example. And that's a scary place, which makes it even harder within the business to say, actually, within this business, we want to create a psychologically safe space for you. So it's going to make our jobs harder. And I think as individuals, we need to check in on people more. We need to check in on our friends. We need to check in on our work colleagues, and we need to dial up the authentic empathy to make sure that people are okay. And what I would say is that from an organizational point of view, if I look at what we've done over the past couple of years, without talking about representation, we've decreased our attrition rate. We've decreased the number of sickness days. There's so many good things that have been brought about as a consequence. And it's not just all due to me. This is about the whole business. But that costs business. High turnover rates cost businesses. The lower the turnover rate, the better it is for business. The less sickness days people take, the better it is for business. So if we talk about it in terms of like, what are the implications of a lack of inclusion? The implications are massive costs on our businesses. So getting inclusion right is a business driver, and we have to continue and commit to that, I believe. I think it's really important to stay strong and stay committed, both internally within any role that people have within the business. You don't have to have a ED&I role to make sure that people feel welcomed and included, but also we just know it's a scarier place. And as much as there's people saying that, you know, people don't exist, people do exist. And we have to recognise and continue to see that those people exist within our communities, within our organisations, within our friendship groups. And as I say, just check in and make sure that they're okay. But it's going to be it's already been a bit of a messy 25. It's going to get messier. But in that mess, we can still find the magic, I would say. Yeah, and you've got to continue to keep finding the calm in the eye of the storm. But yeah, people are backtracking and it's not good, in my humble opinion. But from a BaxterStorey point of view, we absolutely remain committed to fueling everyone's individuality. And that's why, if it's authentic to the business, there's no reason to stop doing what you're doing.
No. And thank you to you guys at BaxterStorey. It's about now allies and advocates and supporting each other, showing up for each other. Like you say, now it's standing strong together and reaching out to the communities so that, like you say, we check in on each other and show up for each other. And that's our commitment too at NoraBox. So yeah, like you say, we know we've got some bumpy times ahead, but it's about standing strong and making sure that we look after each other, because like you say, it makes perfect business sense, isn't it?
Yeah,
not
totally.
just people sense. So
yeah,
thank you for that strong commitment there. I thought you were going to say that. It was really inspirational what you've
and business growth, Donna. Like at the end of the day, our business has grown over the last 2 years. Well, and I say, it's not all down to me, for sure. It is a combined team effort to grow our business, but if it's that bad for business, we wouldn't have seen growth. We wouldn't have seen a reduction in sickness days, a reduction in our turnover rate. We see that. And that's, as I say, it's not just the work I'm doing. It's work that all of us are doing within the company. And it makes one, human sense, and it makes us better humans to stay committed to it, but it makes business sense as well.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's the perfect note to end the conversation on, Lyndsey. You've shared so much in such an honest, authentic way. You talked about authenticity, and you've got it, you know, just it comes out the screen. It's amazing to listen to. That's why we wanted to showcase the work that you guys do at BaxterStorey. So good luck with your awards as well. Again,
Thank
you've been
you.
very modest about talking of them,
I
but I know it's
know.
not about awards, but isn't it lovely
No,
to
it's
get that
not.
recognition?
Well, it is,
Great.
and it's not, right? It is, yes, absolutely. Even being shortlisted,
Yeah,
as I say, we're winning
amazing.
anyway.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's those individual comments that people come up to me that make me super happy.
Yeah, I can just imagine. And a great, exciting year ahead. So as I say, more power to you guys. And for those of you who are listening, do check out BaxterStorey's LinkedIn and so on. There's some great
Yeah.
stuff on there.
Follow
And you
us on
can find out,
LinkedIn, follow
yeah,
us
you
on
can find out how you get
Instagram.
on with those awards, Lyndsey,
Yeah.
as well, that I keep
Yeah,
talking
reach
about.
out. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
a good
brilliant.
business. And actually, like, even if you don't want to kind of join a hospitality business, it's a great business. And
Yeah.
you'll get to see some amazing food on Instagram and LinkedIn, even just following, let alone all the stuff that our ERGs are doing too.
You've got that real feel good factor around the company, which, like you say, it can only be good, isn't it? Because that's what we want from our hospitality professionals as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming on. I'd love to chat with you always, because yeah, the work is spot on, absolutely on point. And wasn't that a great conversation, everyone? I think, you know, one of the antidotes to some of the negativity that, let's face it, sadly, we are seeing in this space now. The antidote is to celebrate the fantastic work, and as Lyndsey says, to be there for each other and stand strong, as some of the things that we really believe and value now are sadly under threat in some ways, if I can put it like that. So on that note, we will say goodbye to you. Big thanks again to Lyndsey. And yeah, look forward to you guys joining us next time for another Let's Talk session. So until then, take care, everyone, and see you next time.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.